So we always finish, Michael, on a time machine. And I have to go back to the feeling I had on Sunday that I had when Matt O'Neill played Rangers for the first time in August on a sunshine filled day in the East End of Glasgow. And that Henry Glass and chip. Um, now we went straight down the road on the bus after that game, and we stopped, I think, in Gervin, and a few beers and some crack in the boat and home that night to sing song, which you're not allowed to have on the boat, but there was no one stopping to sing song that night, you know. But when you think back to Matt O'Neill's, first tenure in charge, and then there was Rangers beat us 5-1 in Ibrox the following game after that, you know. And Dick Advocat, the Rangers manager, came out and said, we're going to bring out a video now or a DVD because Celtic had brought out the 6-2. But they made a goal. Yeah. We've had the Nakamura goal against, Rangers. Hatati scored a cracker against them. So over the years, Michael, what goals stick out for you against Rangers? Obviously, De Larson does in the 6-2 and Naka, Hatati. But, you surely have another memory of beating them or a goal.
I've got a few memories, man, but George McCluskey's goal in the 1980 Cup final, which sparked absolute chaos, after the final whistle. Probably for me, though, would be Paul McStay's against Souness's Rangers team at Ibrox. I was in the enclosure that day when we used to get, I think we got 14,000 or something in away support at that time. And that was a, although it didn't technically, mathematically win the title, for me, that was a game that did it for us. We won the title against Dundee at home, but that was just a few weeks before it, and that was the difference between Rangers getting back into it and it was an incredible game. It wasn't the most technical of games, but it was hell for leather. And McStay's goal, that was just phenomenal, I think, because he started the move on the right-hand side. The ball bubbled about and he just smashed it with his left foot. And I don't think younger people realise how good a player McStay was. There's a lot made about how he didn't win as much as he should have in his time. But he absolutely dominated games, man. And he had such a tremendous footballing brain. He could tackle. His passes could split defences for anywhere in the park, So, that was just, for me, that one sticks in my mind. Obviously, we've got loads after that. Then we've got Baravchik and stuff, and we've got so many goals against them that I could just go through. But
Thomas scored a couple of crackers as well.
He did, but Sutton, for me, I know they 2 goals in that 6-2 game you're talking about. Everybody remembers Larson's goal, but Sutton for me was just phenomenal in that game, and he was phenomenal that season. I thought he was probably the most fouled player in the league, but the foul count wouldn't have told you that, because he used to just travel up the park with like 3 players hanging off him at times. Still with the ball. For such a skinny looking guy, his strength was incredible. And it was before that, we had Mark Viduka the season before that, and I never ever took to Mark Viduka. I just thought he was an imposter. He was a technically gifted player, really good football player, but I just never took to him. There was something about him I just didn't like.
Probably because of his delayed coming in. Remember,
probably and I was at that first game against Morton down at Capello when he eventually turned up and scored in that game. But for me, Sutton was everything. He epitomised everything that was good about O'Neill's side. It was just his strength of character was incredible. And he wasn't afraid to call the refs out either.
And he's still hanging around.
He's still annoying people.
He's on TV nearly every day. Or a podcast or something.
I've still got a T-shirt. It's official merchandise for back then. It's just got a number. It's black with a white number 9 on the back with Sutton along it. I've not got many. There's no many players that I would actually go and say I would get, but I've got Sutton.
He was a good one.
I don't wear it, but it's still there for.
And on the day that we lost the season, against Dunfermline, remember we beat them 5-0 and the Huns won 6-0.
They won 6-1, I think it was.
6-1, and he called it out that day, didn't he? Yes, he's been asked a few times over the last week. on Saturday, someone asked me about. I said on the podcast to Joe that the first game I was at, he played in, back in 1989, the Barton in the Cup. And
Right, okay.
Joe was telling me that Billy McNeil held back the win bonus,
Right.
and then in the next round, I think they played Montrose or something. They played someone as well, from the lower leagues, and they won again, but they were terrible, and he withheld. But he gave it back to them when they won the cup, and
Right.
when Joe scored the goal
Right.
in '89. But just someone was asking me the other day what was the team, and I was after sending it to. So the team that day, and my first game was Pat Bonner, Chris Morris, Anton Rogan, Derek White, Mick McCarthy, Peter Grant, Joe Miller, Paul McStay, Andy Walker, Mark McGee, and Tommy Bones. And the subs
Mark
were
McGee in there.
Owen Archdeacon and John Trainer. So there's
Dirty
John Trainer.
Dingus.
There's a name you wouldn't think of much.
Sean Trainer. Dirty
No.
Dingus is in there, man. He was a great player for Celtic, Even
Yeah.
better player for Aberdeen, right enough. But
He was on McAvenny's podcast recently, and it's a brilliant interview because Mac has done all the centenary team, but the only one they can't get is Anton Rogan because he said, no, you'll have to come to the pub and meet me. He says, and we'll have a chat in
he
the
lives
pub.
in England, doesn't he?
Yeah, but he's
Taxi
obviously
firms or something, I think, isn't
he
Anton.
they tried to do it with him online, and he went, no. He says he's just not.
I
But
loved Anton as well, man. He was a tremendous athlete, you know what I mean? Just
yeah.
a heart of a lion. No, he was just throw himself into everything. No, he comes in for a bit of criticism now and again because of a couple of penalties he conceded. You know what I mean? But I thought he was a phenomenal.
I remember his dad used to be on the boat
Mm.
in the Celtic Blazers and that, because if you remember back then, a lot of the sports clubs, the older boys had the Blazers. They were obviously immaculately dressed going over to the games. But yeah, Anton, I think him and Joe are still great buddies. I think they talk regularly. Joe was telling us a few stories. We continued the podcast in private on Saturday.
It was Distillery, I think we signed Anton for, wasn't it?
Was it Distillery? Yeah.
I think it was Distillery I signed for.
When you think like they were the foreign, Joe said they were the foreign players back then. There was Alan McNoy, Packy, Mick, Chris, and Anton, and then the rest. But he said all Celtic boys from in and around Glasgow, and he said Rangers then had all the English players up. So like it was an extra incentive. He says to go out and win for Celtic when you're playing against English players playing for Rangers. And you think the game now is flooded with foreign players.
Here's a peculiar fact. You're right, I think it was '89, and we played Honved in Europe, and we had a goalkeeping crisis, and we ended up with Alan Ruff playing, I think, 5 or 6 games.
That's right,
for Celtic, and peculiarly, Partick Thistle, he was at Partick Thistle for, I don't know, a decade, longer than that, no? Scotland goalie and stuff. And he played in Europe once with Thistle. It was after the 1971 League Cup final where they beat us 4-1. They were 4-0 up at half time, Thistle, which was an incredible result given the side that we had, all conquering European side that we had then, Douglas and all. Thistle drew Honved in that, and they get put out. And then he played in Europe for Celtic, and it was Honved again, bizarrely, that he played against. He had a really good save in the second leg, because Honved won the first leg 1-0 in Budapest, or in Hungary. I think it was played in Budapest. And then we won the second leg 4-0, but it was a early, he made a save maybe 10 minutes in. I'm sure the guy was through 1-1, and he made a block, and that kept us in the tie, because we were 2-0 down. What might have happened, not me? But aye, that's a strange one. I actually met Alan Ruff at a wedding a few years back, and I said that to him. I went to him. He went, aye, that's right. So, yeah. And I went on about a Scotland-England game he played in. It's the only Scotland-England game I've ever attended, and it was 1978 before Scotland went to the World Cup. We were going to win the Cup. We had European Cup winners and stuff on our side, so it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility, and we all believed we were going to win it. And Ruff went up with, I think it was Mick Shannon he went up with, and he was fouled. Shannon headed his arm and he dropped the ball, and Steve, I'm sure it was Steve Coppell that scored. So I says, you were fouled in that game, and he was buzzing, because I could remember these things. I can't remember last week, but I can remember 1978 when I was only when I was still in primary school.
I vaguely remember Scotland going to the World Cup then, but do you remember all the teams had a song when they qualified for? And was I remember one year Scotland qualified. It was We Have a Dream.
Aye, that was 82.
Steve Archibald was in that team, wasn't he? I remember them all on top of the pops.
Aye. Aye. We were on a march with Ali's Army for the 78 one. No?
That's what it was, yeah.
Aye. And then it was We Have a Dream was B.A. Robertson, I think it was the guy that wrote that. So aye. Yeah. Aye, that was probably the best Scotland World Cup song out of them all, because the rest of them are sort of forgettable, apart from Alex Army. But that was because we were going to really shake them up when we win the World Cup. But we got beat with Peru, drew with Iran,
and that was used.
Beat the finalists, Holland, 3-2.
And those lyrics were used in when I think Ireland went. I think it was the 1990 World Cup, and it was we're all part of Jackie's army. We're all off to Italy, and we really shake them up when we win the World Cup. But I was doing a day club, not last weekend, the weekend before that, and I think it was 6 to 10, but there was a singer coming on after me, an acoustic singer. He was doing the late gig. And he was going, they should have had me on first, because obviously people are full at kind of a disco. And then he used to come on. But fair play to me, he came on about 15 minutes after finished. And the fourth song he sang was We're All Part of Jackie's Army, because it was that age group. And the fucking place went mental.
The B-side of that Ali's Army song, it was Andy Cameron, actually, the comedian, or alleged comedian, who's a big Rangers fan.
That's right, yeah.
Produced that. The B-side was a song called I Want to Be a Punk Rocker, and it went, I want to be a punk rocker, but my mammy won't let me. That was a line in it, no? And peculiarly enough, I'm on to get into the punk rock scene after that. So I don't know if Andy Cameron's got something to do with it. I doubt it, you know.
You and Joe Miller, average Joe Miller, you as well like Sheena, you as well punk rockers.
Aye, Mama let me, that was the difference. On that note, yeah, one of my older brothers was a punk rocker. I inherited great record collections when all my brothers moved. Matt got married, and then the two boys moved to England. So I inherited a mod collection, a punk collection, and a 70s collection. So some mix in there, and I still have all the records in it. They're in this room here. Some worse than others, I suppose.
Yeah, there's some crackers and there's some. Well, I bought a few over the years myself. So good times, Michael. We've gone back in the time machine. We started talking about the 6-2, and it took us back to we're all part of Ali's army and Jackie's army. So it's always a pleasure, Michael.